Good day, everyone. My name is Rebecca Lilly for the International Association for Energy Economics. It gives me great pleasure to welcome you to today's webinar entitled Switching Energy Suppliers. It's not all about the money. We're grateful to our moderator, Catherine Wadhams, and our distinguished panelists for today's timely discussion. First, a little bit about the International Association for Energy Economics. We are the largest association specializing in the field of energy economics and provide a forum for the exchange of ideas, experience, and issues among professionals interested in the field. The organization produces 2 professional journals, a newsletter, and holds conferences and virtual presentations along with a host of other products and services that you can find at our website at www.iaee.org. If you're not already a member of the association, we welcome you to join. A few housekeeping matters in regard to today's webinar before I hand things over to our moderator. First, this webinar is being recorded for those that cannot participate in today's live event. If you have questions, please click the Q&A button at the bottom of the Zoom window and type your question. We've allocated sufficient time at the end of the webinar to read and answer them. And now I would like to introduce you to our moderator, Dr. Catherine Wadhams, Center for Competition Policy at the University of East Anglia, United Kingdom.
Thank you very much indeed, Rebecca. I'm very pleased to have this opportunity to present the research, which is joint work, as you'll see, with several colleagues. I'm going to be presenting it jointly with my colleague, Monica Giulietti, who is a professor in microeconomics at Loughborough University, and she and I have collaborated on many projects in this area, and so it's a particular pleasure to present with her. We were hoping that David Della could join us, and he is going to join us for the discussion, but not for the presentation. So I share my screen. I can. Oh. One moment. Sorry, is that working for sharing the screen?
It is not.
It isn't?
No.
Okay. I'm sorry. It always does it when absolutely fine when you're practicing, but not when you're doing it for real. Share screen.
There we go.
Okay. Splendid. Oops.
Perfect.
Good. Thank you very much. So, as well as Monica, our co-authors are David, as I've mentioned, Graham Looms, Anna Monice, and Ju-Young Jeon, and the research was undertaken at the Centre for Competition Policy at the University of East Anglia, and we're very pleased to acknowledge the support of the Economic and Social Research Council in this research, as well as the Centre for Competition Policy. So just to give you some plan of what we're going to talk about, we'll talk a little bit about the motivation and relevance of the research, and that's going to be a particular question because the market has changed a fair bit since the data that we're using was generated in 2012, and we'll talk about that. The market was quite benign at the time, at least in retrospect, at the time that we undertook this research, and switching was an important element of the market, and that has changed since then because of the price cap, and that's part of what we'll discuss. One of the issues here is we're looking at non-financial reasons for switching, and I think that's very relevant to the market as it goes forward. So we'll say a little bit about the UK energy market at the time and how it informed the background to the research and also more recent developments. Tell you about the main features of the Big Switch campaign, the data and methodology, and a brief discussion of how that was done, and then a discussion of the econometric results and where we see this helping and what the policy implications are for this going forward. So the market's been open in the UK since 1999, the residential retail energy markets, this is. Switching rates have traditionally been higher than in many other European countries, especially, in many other countries, especially European ones. But there was increasing concern, and we'll see some evidence for that, over the different prices that were paid by active and inactive consumers, and in particular the distributional implications, particularly since those who had lower income and less education were generally less active in the market and therefore got less good deals. And these concerns led to several reviews since the markets were opened, including one by the energy regulator, Ofgem, the energy supply probe in 2008, after which there was quite a lot of intervention from the regulator. And this led on to an investigation by the Competition Markets Authority, which took 2 years and ended in 2016. One of the problems that all of these identified was weak consumer response, and that this led to consumer detriment. And so it was relevant to try and explore a little bit what the nature of that response was, and that's what we were undertaking in this research. In January 2019, as a result of these various interventions and concerns, the government asked the regulator to impose a price cap on retail energy prices, which was introduced as a temporary measure. And as many of these temporary measures turn out to be, it's not only become permanent now, there's legislation to enable it to become permanent, but also it's governing the market because there aren't good offers other than those that are just within the price cap. So many of the switching platforms have just stopped operating and advise people to stick where they are and take advantage of the price cap. So this is taking a look back at the market to see what it looked like at what seems like another time, but I think we can still learn quite a lot about consumers from this. So here's a picture of the offers that were available in the energy market. It's a very particular time frame, as you see, from the time of our, pretty well when our data were generated at the beginning of this in 2012. And I just draw your attention to the differences here, in particular between the average standard variable tariff for large legacy suppliers, that's the orange line that you see, not surprisingly higher up, the pounds per year paid by a typical consumer, as compared with the cheapest tariff basket, which is the dotted line you see coming along. It's not right at the bottom. Oh, cheapest tariff all suppliers. Sorry, I should draw attention to that. The red line, so that there's quite a big gap even at the beginning of our of the time period we're looking at here. But this gap is getting bigger if you look certainly up until January 2019, which was the imposition of the price cap. From January 2019, we have the price cap, which is, you'll not be surprised to see, followed exactly by the most expensive tariffs that are offered. So it's this widening gap that led to the price cap, which was designed to reduce the gap. It didn't immediately do that, as you see. I could have extended this to the current date, but what would have happened is that all of this detail would have disappeared because the price has shot up. All these lines have converged and the price cap has followed a very rapidly increasing retail price in the last year or so, but particularly in the last 6 months. So that's the background there. And switching, I did bring that up to date, and you could see that that's plummeting at the end. As there are no good deals to switch to, it's good to know that people stop switching. The other thing that's quite interesting here is you'll see a peak in 2013, which was when retail energy prices were the focus of political statements and almost competition between the two main parties of would there be a freeze on prices, or would there be some other mechanism to really ensure greater fairness in this market. And when you get this political salience, you also get general interest and response to the market. But otherwise, you can see that switching went down a little bit, then went up a bit, and then has plummeted more recently. The benefit of what we have looked at, which is part of a decision in a large-scale auction, is that we're able to see pure switching, and we're able to see it actually happen. Monica and I and others have done lots of surveys in which we ask people about their attitude, about whether they've switched, about whether they would switch. And that's always subject to, as perhaps we know from introspection, a lack of accuracy. What we do here is we know the offer that people were made, we see the offer that people were made, and we see their response to that. There is a limitation to that. It's their response to that within the auction. Did they take this offer when it was made to us here? Of course, we don't know what they did outside the market. Perhaps they all rushed off and looked to see if they could find better offers in the market. But within the auction, they had put in quite a lot of information about themselves. And at the moment they were offered the choice of, do you want to switch to this offer or possibly to one of two offers, for a reason I'll explain. Very little additional effort was required. You just had to fill in a very simple form. The only thing that I could think could possibly have put people off, the only extra piece of information that was asked for was age, but it was really extremely limited what then had to be done. People were sent several reminders if they didn't immediately respond. And that decision process was observed and recorded. So it's real data in that sense, real decision data. The process was that first of all, you registered your interest, name and address, I think your company, the company that supplied you. Address turns out to be important because there's a tradition and indeed still a practice of regional price differences across different fairly large regions of Great Britain. And so that became important. But having registered, then Which, who were organising the auction, asked you for some more details about consumption. Perhaps if you didn't know exactly how much you used, they'd estimate it for you using the size of your house and the number of people who lived in it and so on. Then Which negotiated, we had an auction, and then they came back to the individuals with a choice between, here's the offer we can make you. And just sometimes there were two offers. So 3 auctions were run for different types of payment method. Most consumers elected to participate in what we call direct debit. That's paying through your bank regularly, monthly. There were about 100,000 in that. Suppliers were required to offer a national tariff for dual fuel supply, which was a problem for some of them because they had different costs in different regions and had different tariffs in different regions. So that limited participation to some extent. The winner was a small company, the Co-op Energy Supply Company. But because of this national versus local issue, some consumers could get a better deal on the open market than they could from the co-op bid. And if that was the case, they were informed if a better offer was available for them, and they would be shown 2 offers as a result of that. They switched, most people who switched did so to the auction winner. There's Co-op Energy, which is the big blue bit of the slide. Of the others, mainly it was EDF who offered the better deal. And then you can see that other large companies and indeed other small companies also made also gained some through this process. So 72% of those who switched did so via the auction, and to the best deal and only saw one offer, and 28% were shown another offer, and 28% of the switchers were choosing between two offers. Have I skipped a slide? I think I have, sorry, I'll try and go back. Don't know how to do that. Because I think I did want to tell you that the participants were not, this will work. Yeah, the participants were not typical of British households in terms of various characteristics. So on the right, you've got people, the average through Great Britain. In the kind of middle column, the left-hand column, all respondents, these are all the people who were participating in the auction, for which we had additional information because we sent out subsequent surveys. But we only used some of those respondents, and so we've also got the filtered respondents here. Probably it's only relevant to look at perhaps at the last two columns. But you can see that the people who took part, who we analysed, were older on average than heads of household in Great Britain. They were more male than average, though more men participated in this. They were considerably better educated. Many more had a higher first degree or higher. Many fewer rented their own homes, and fewer were in receipt of disability benefits. But for those who we actually analysed, the median income category was similar to that in Great Britain, although in the group as a whole, that it was slightly above, slightly lower, which is surprising. Sorry, I'm having trouble here. So among the participants, we also have some differences between those who switched and those who didn't switch. Remember that they're not typical. They're already, if you like, considerably better educated than the average British household. But we do notice some changes between switchers and others. The switchers, again, are better educated, although the whole group is better educated. The switchers are better educated than the non-switchers within the participants. They were more likely to own their own home, either with a mortgage or outright. The median savings that they could make were higher, and that's not surprising, of course. You'd expect those to be associated, switching and the level of savings. But the median bill sizes were very similar. We also noticed that the switchers were richer on average than the non-switchers, which is a bit surprising given that the median bill size was very similar. But that's something that we observe in this sample. So I think, Monica, you're going to take over from here. So I'll stop sharing and enable you to share for the remainder of it. Are you muted?
Thank you, Catherine. I'll try and be as smooth as possible in the process of changing the slides. I believe the screen is shared now, so I will continue the description of the kind of respondents, to our survey that we had decided to focus on. So Catherine previously mentioned that there was a group of respondents to our survey who had the opportunity to save money. But we wanted to make sure, given that our focus was on leaving money on the table, that we could look at the decisions of consumers who entered the process for the purpose of saving money. So the group of consumers that we focused on in our statistical analysis were those who were paying through an automatic system, this direct debit, which is done through the bank on a monthly basis. They were actually offered savings that they could make as a result of the auction. They only had one supplier for both their fuels, or potentially using only one fuel, but so the people who had the simplest choice when deciding whether or not to change suppliers. And they stated that their intention in taking part of this campaign, the big switch, was to save money. So we were looking at the most favorable conditions for choosing to switch. And this has led us to a group of consumers whose responses we analyzed that was in the area of 7,500 observations. Now we're at the point where I'm hoping to be able to, yes, move forward. Okay, so looking at only the consumers that we focused on, we find that 83% were offered savings, and that 42% had switched supplier. We also find out that they had the opportunity to save on average around 10% of their bill. And one interesting feature to consider in the information we have about these consumers is the existence of an exit fee, which, as we will see in a minute or two, was considered to be a potential issue when making the decision to change supplier. So in the contracts that existed at the time, there was often a condition that in order to interrupt the contract before the end of its natural life, you might have to pay a fee, which at the time was, I believe, in the area of about around £30. So a lot less than it would have been possible to save for a large number of respondents. The majority of them were paying actually by direct debit. And then I'll start talking about the results in terms of the switching rates that we saw. So by size of potential annual savings, we're looking along the vertical axis at the percentage of participants that decided to change suppliers. So for relatively low potential savings, we see relatively low saving rates. But even across our survey respondents, who are the people who are most potentially motivated to take advantage of financial gains, we remain around the value of about 50%, with a peak of maybe 50, 56, 67% that took up the opportunity to save on their annual bills, even when the amount involved was in the area of potentially a third of their average bill. So not an overwhelming decision to grab the opportunities to save on their annual bills. And so our analysis looks at the probability that our respondents will switch supplier, considering both monetary and non-monetary factors. And we're interested in this talk today to highlight those elements that are non-financial considerations, that were brought forward in the responses to our survey. The way we did the analysis in technical terms, is a probit model of the likelihood of switching, conditional on a number of factors that might affect this decision. So we grouped the potential categories of drivers for the decision to switch into 5 main areas. We considered monetary savings, preferences that are not related to price, such as potentially ethical and environmental considerations, elements associated with uncertainty about the bills and uncertainty about the process, concerns about potential things going wrong with the switching process, and finally, time pressures at the time when this campaign for saving on your energy bills was run by the Consumer Association, we have some verbal description of our results and some numerical information. So in terms of monetary factors that affect the decision to switch, we identified the fact that, as expected, switching was higher when the amount of savings was also higher, as we saw in the previous diagram. But there were 2 other elements affecting these monetary considerations: expectations about how much consumers would have liked to save. So sometimes their expectations were not fulfilled in the auction, and also the existence of an exit fee, regardless of the size, in the sense that many of our respondents did know that they had an exit fee, but they didn't know the amount. And that still was a factor that would, in most cases, prevent them from making the decision to switch. Then looking at other preferences not associated with prices, with the size of the bill, we noticed that those consumers who were already served by the winner of the auction, Co-op, were expressing a preference for remaining with them. But other consumers that were not supplied by them expressed a preference towards this company as associated with their ethical and environmental consideration. Actually, I should be more precise about this. So ethical and environmental considerations were indicated as factors that affected their decision, and we thought that the Co-op energy supplier had at the time a strong reputation for being an ethical company with strong environmental reputation. Therefore, they would have benefited from this particular reputation. And also our respondents indicated preferences about features of the tariffs, either the tariff offered by their previous supplier, in which case they expressed a complaint and regarding that particular tariff, and a positive view about the new offered tariff. So our general conclusion about this set of not monetary preferences is that actually consumers do not see energy as homogeneous, or more generally, they didn't make their decision exclusively based on the amount that they would have been able to save. So looking at a bit of the numerical evidence about this, we can see that the factors I mentioned previously, being served by the cooperative energy company, is a positive effect. Displeasure with the tariff offered by the current supplier as a negative effect, and all the other factors associated with ethical and environmental conditions, but also features of the tariff were significantly affecting the decision of our respondents to accept the offer of a new supplier. Looking at additional factors that we have found evidence for was the lack of confidence in the size of their actual bills. And this was evident for people who were not able to supply a precise information about their actual bill size. So those people who had their bills estimated, for example, or the fact that these people were aware of potential penalties that they might have to pay by moving at the time of moving suppliers. We also found, as Catherine has illustrated earlier, that people who saw two offers were less prepared to switch supplier. And we think this might be a factor that adds an element of uncertainty about what is the best deal that can be found in the market if this process has not necessarily led to the maximum saving that is available. Other factors that were mentioned were that people might have been busy at the time when they were offered the savings, and those respondents were less likely to accept the offer because other things were going on in their lives. And then finally, there was a series of factors associated with concerns about potentially things going wrong in the process of changing suppliers, despite the fact that actually a lot of the hard work had been done by the Consumer Association to bring them to the point of switching suppliers. So to finish off with a few considerations, first of all, I will sum up on the result of the statistical work that we've done. We've come to the conclusion that a series of preferences not necessarily associated with pricing and the size of the bill leads the decision to change supplier. And this goes against the perception that energy should be seen as an homogeneous group. Consumers actually have related preferences that are not simply associated with price. Time constraints might make it difficult for people who are busy or financially stressed to take advantage of best deals. And this is a factor that we think will be relevant in future, particularly at this time of high energy prices. There might be groups of society that are particularly challenged in terms of being able to take advantage of better deals for them. The price caps that were mentioned at the start of the presentation originally were seen as complementary to the competition process, and now they are seen as a central tool to protect vulnerable consumers. We think that financial gains will continue to play an important role. So the issue of offering good deals to different type of consumers is an important, plays an important role in limiting the size of bills at times of high energy prices. And finally, that a series of interventions, both financial and non-financial, might be required to protect consumers, while in recent times we have seen mostly financial interventions being being introduced by governments in order to deal with the high energy prices that we are seeing. And continuing with this idea of non-financial intervention, our conclusion is that the financial incentives are important, but they're not sufficient. And as we look at future developments in this sector, there is an expectation that smart grids, distributed generation, time of use tariffs, and so on will emerge and will create new opportunities for consumers to make an efficient use of energy. That will require consumers to become more engaged with their consumption and their financial and non-financial choices about their supplier. But also there will be opportunity for businesses maybe to provide value-added services that will reduce the number of challenges and obstacles that consumers need to overcome in order to have the best deal and use their energy efficiently. So the final statement is about the fact that regulators and policymakers need to reflect about the role of financial incentives, as on their own, they are not likely to generate competition, but at the same time, suppressing these financial incentives might hinder opportunities for competition to thrive and potentially new services and new companies emerging into the market. So I think this is the end of our presentation. You have our contact details here, and many thanks for your attention for now. I think we will revert to the question and answers area to just see whether there's any clarification or interest in developing these issues further. Let me just...
So Monica, I suppose the obvious question is, now we're not in a time where people are looking for the cheapest deal because they're protected by the price cap. What does this tell us about how consumers relate to the energy market more generally, and what are the challenges that we might face in needing that kind of involvement? Have you got any thoughts on that?
I think at the moment, as you were discussing earlier, there is a perception that we don't need to worry too much because we're protected by the price cap, but considerations about the affordability of energy as the weather becomes colder will come to the forefront of households, and then there will be a desire to seek alternative options. And at that time, it is possible that we will see companies trying to maybe diversify their offers and trying to sort of reach out to their potential consumers on with offers that address different needs. And these needs might potentially be associated with developing energy efficiency, awareness about when we use our energy, and ideally also investing in measures that can help us conserve and reduce our demand. So potentially the crisis might not be completely wasted, and it might lead us to consumers who make considerations that are more long-term than just the size of the bill.
Yeah, no, I agree with you, absolutely. I think that I guess opening the market to competition, encouraging people to switch to the cheapest deal was an attempt, and successful in many senses, though despite all the difficulties and challenges of it, to involve consumers in the energy market. And I think you're exactly right that we're going to go on needing consumer involvement. And what our results show is that it's a lot more complicated. It's not just about the money. It's a lot more complicated than just saving the money. Although, as you say, it's the need to save that money that might grab their attention. But then, you know, I think that's really useful. I see that David has asked us a question. He asks where we think the debate about consumer switching will be in 5 to 10 years' time. Will it be automated? Wouldn't have to worry about this at all. Will the focus shift to whether consumers adopt low carbon technologies? I think this leads on really well from what you were saying. Will the need to meet climate targets lead to more compulsion, less consumer choice? So in that case, perhaps less so. I don't know do you have any thoughts on that?
I guess looking to 5 to 10 years time, potentially technology might help us, and we will be able to have alternative options that didn't emerge when the market was initially liberalized. I think at the time there was this expectation that innovation would happen through market competition, and actually we've seen very little of that. Competition has mostly been about price. Now that wholesale prices are generally high for everyone, maybe the competition will have to be on different dimensions, and maybe it will be the companies that can make life easier for consumers that will be the winner in this future scenario of competition. So automation might be a route to attracting consumers and saving money for them.
Yeah, and I guess David's right that needing to meet climate targets might actually reduce the choice that individual consumers are allowed to have. I mean, there's a continuum, isn't there? There's a choice that government and regulators have to make between, and it's always been there, it's just changed a lot recently, but the choice between protecting consumers and involving them and encouraging choice, and with the hope of encouraging innovation. Maybe the fact that that innovation's been a little disappointing. I think we're expecting a lot of energy service offers rather than still the focus on just selling the units of heat and light and so on. Maybe that suggests that protection is more important. I don't know whether that's a conclusion one would come to from that, but maybe. Monica, do you know anything? I'm sorry, I'm asking all the questions. This is not, but it's fun for me, but a bit mean. So we look forward to other questions in both the chat and the questions and answers. We can pick up either of those. So hope to have some more challenges. But Monica, I wondered how other European countries were dealing with the current situation, which of course has been exacerbated by the war in Ukraine.
As far as I'm aware, there have been different interventions across Europe. As I was saying earlier, there have been mostly financial interventions. One of the measures that have been taken, for example, it was the removal of VAT from energy bills. The French and the Italian government have given monetary help, so basically monetary transfers to all consumers, which is something that has been done in the UK as well as an immediate form of intervention. And I guess specific measures for vulnerable consumers have been strengthened and through the benefit systems in different countries. So at the moment, it seems to be that to different extents, the policies that have been adopted have been short-term financial help, And I guess from now on, there will have to be measures that are maybe more about investing to increase energy efficiency. And actually one possibly lucky policy measure that was introduced in Italy was a bonus for energy efficiency in in buildings, that was introduced as a way to promote a recovery after the pandemic, and that has been taken up quite successfully. And it's one of those long-term measures that maybe other countries will take up, looking at more long-term measures to address.
Well, yes, I
the
hope somebody is assessing that, so that other countries can then benefit from the Italian experience, see who takes it up. And one of the issues in although our sample was very unrepresentative and was better off and better educated than the population as a whole, we saw that within that group, the switchers seem to have higher income than the non-switchers, which I guess underlines the concern that the regulator and the government had always had, many people had had, that those who are active got better deals. Of course, that's true in many markets. If you go around looking for better deals, you're likely to get them. And there aren't very many markets in which you don't have the opportunity for a bargain, if you like, but you have to work for it. But people do worry if that's becomes, and there's also often more difficult for low-income people to get those bargains, either because they don't have access to the same shops, perhaps, or they may not have access to the internet in the same way. Sometimes it's associated with having to buy small amounts of things because you can't get quantity discounts if you don't have enough money to buy a bigger amount, and so on.
Actually, that reminds me of an early piece of work that we did together, looking at prepayment meter users. So those consumers who are have been in debt mainly, and basically have to have a pay and go system. And when we interviewed a large number of them, they were saying, despite the fact that this system is more expensive, it allows us to manage our budgets. And therefore, we would rather pay more and keep control. And I guess these considerations must be valid across other markets as well.
Yes, I think their technology helps because it's now possible with smart meters for example, I have a cap on the amount that my mobile phone bill is allowed to go, so that I don't accidentally use a whole lot of data and rack up huge sums, huge debts there. And I think now it would probably be possible to allow those measures of control to people without it being more expensive for them, because I think that was the problem, that it was more expensive for the companies to operate, particularly when they used mainly cash. I think now there's very little cash involved, but the handling of the cash was expensive. And so it wasn't that companies wanted to punish poor people, but they were just offering a service that was more expensive. Whereas I think that's perhaps less the case now, that technology has enabled us to deliver a lot of these services without extra cost. Now, whether anybody has really taken, well, I'm sure some people have, but whether it's really being rolled out, the possibilities that exist for this particular market, I don't know. There may be more possibilities there, but I think that's one optimistic thing about the developments that there have been. But as you say, we have to be quite careful that in being concerned about a particular group of people, we don't make too many assumptions about what that group needs. We need to be able to hear from the people themselves exactly what their preferences are. It reminds me of even earlier than that work, Monica. I can remember talking to people in British Gas when it was, I think, probably still a nationalised entity. And they were keen to help low-income people manage their budgets, so they went to various people who went to various places where people would receive benefits and so on, to offer them good tips on how to save money. And of course discovered that the people who had to save money were quite good at it, and they came away, these people, keen on offering good advice, learning a lot more than they could contribute. Yeah.
But also, say, other considerations that might be relevant from our work are issues about like time, having time available to dedicate to this activity. And there might be areas of society where they're not particularly vulnerable from a financial point of view, but just unable to dedicate the necessary time to these activities, just because they have long working hours or families to look after. And once again, maybe if services existed that would cater for this group of consumers, one would expect that it would be beneficial. And so offering a range of different services tailored to the needs of different parts of society might be an outcome that we might be able to see in the future.
Yes, that would be a very good result of, of the current crisis, in a sense, if it focuses on that. I wonder if other people who are participating have any questions, or have anything that they would like to tell us about the situation where they are, because I'm aware that we're probably an international audience. And we'd be really pleased to hear about other people's situations, or how the energy market is looking where you are.
Should we consider at this stage asking Rebecca to come back in if there are no further questions?
Well, IAEE would like to thank both Catherine Wadhams and Monica Giulietti for an outstanding webinar. This webinar will be available on IAEE's website for a future download. If you're not already a member of IAEE, we encourage you to join by visiting www.iaee.org. We thank you for attending, and I officially close this webinar.